heard from a friend. Yoko had recently written a greeting letter to her long-unseen grandmother. However, her grandmother had a fall while retrieving the letter. At over 80 years old, this sudden injury left her bedridden and gradually slipping into a coma. During her fleeting moments of consciousness, she made a final request to the nurse. "Please let my youngest son bring my granddaughter to see me one last time, please. Why make us travel all the way from Tokyo? You have another brother," Mother complained throughout the journey. "Because only we have child. Mom just wants to see her granddaughter one last time before she dies," Father replied, exhausted. The smell of gasoline from the bus and the arguments between her parents left Yoko feeling weary. She remembered her grandmother's warm embrace from her childhood. Perhaps she was the only one who didn't want her grandmother to leave this world. The seemingly endless, bumpy country road finally led the family to the grandmother's hospital. The nurse warmly welcomed them after receiving the gifts and led them to the grandmother's ward. As they opened the door, they were hit by a mix of the smell of old age and medication, or perhaps a smell of death. The nurse briskly pulled back the white curtain that concealed the grandmother's bed, revealing her to the family. She appeared before them like a mummy from a special Egyptian exhibit in a museum. Her withered hand slipped out from the thin blanket, fat and muscle having wasted away, leaving only a thin layer of skin stretched taut over bones. The stench grew stronger. Mother, disgusted, pulled out a handkerchief to cover her nose, while Father seemed somewhat ashamed, unable to look at the woman who had raised him, now reduced to a mere skeleton. Most people find the sight of a dying elderly person unbearable, yet driven by moral obligations, they must feign sorrow and concern. This facade is exhausting. The true feelings of relatives often lean towards hoping for the patient's swift demise to relieve the burden, both emotionally and financially, on the family. It's an ugly truth, but a reality nonetheless. The nurse, familiar with such scenes, smilingly escorted the parents out under the pretext of discussing further treatment plans. Yoko wanted to follow, but suddenly noticed her grandmother's hand twitching. "Mom," Grandma's hand moved. "Nonsense! Stay put and behave yourself," her mother snapped. Despite Yoko's reluctance, she was ordered to stay put by her mother. She was alone in this cold hospital room, or rather not quite alone, as her grandmother lay on the bed. The window was ajar, and the curtain by her grandmother's bed fluttered. A shiver ran down Yoko's spine as she turned to flee. "Yoko! Who's there?" Yoko froze in place. "It's me, Grandma. Don't be afraid. Come closer." "Grandma?" Yoko cautiously approached the bed. Though her grandmother remained unconscious, Yoko could distinctly hear her voice. "Yoko, I'm nearing the end, and there's one last wish I haven't fulfilled. To see my brother, whom I was separated from as a child. So, I wish to exchange bodies with you for a day. Help me fulfill this wish." Yoko naturally didn't want to accept this absurd proposal. However, facing her grandmother, who had once held her in her arms, and considering this was her dying wish, Yoko nodded. "Grandma, you must keep your promise. Return my body to me." Suddenly, a fierce wind howled outside. "Come, take Grandma's hand," she said. A flash of lightning, followed by a deafening roar, and an unexpected torrential rain pounded against the windows, creating a dreadful cacophony. Yoko hesitated, inching towards her grandmother's bedside. In the distance, the tolling of a bell echoed through the empty corridors, as if signaling an impending turning point. In a heartbeat, Yoko felt dizzy. She tried to retract her hand, but it was too late. All she felt was pain, unbearable pain she had never known. It wasn't her body anymore. It was the lifeless husk her grandmother was soon to leave behind. Now, grandmother entered Yoko's body. Before they could exchange words, her mother rushed in, pulling her away. The next morning, the rejuvenated grandma, now in Yoko's body, had breakfast with her parents before heading to school. Of course, she didn't take her usual route, but chose a different path. Feeling a surge of energy, she ran and jumped with exhilaration. It had been so long since she felt this alive. She even found herself humming tunes she hadn't remembered for years. She arrived at a secluded alley leading to a dilapidated courtyard. "This is it," she murmured. Through the fence, she saw a paralyzed old man lying on the floor, his eyes hollow with despair, the stench of decay filling the room. Grandma wasn't here for her brother. She was here for her first love. Due to various reasons, they couldn't be together back then. Grandma, unable to forget that love, wanted to see him one last time, even as her life neared its end. Footsteps approached. Family members of the old man entered, mistaking Grandma for a thief. An enraged mother stormed into the police station, striking Grandma across the face. Time was running out. Grandma hastily left the police station, flagging down a taxi towards the hospital. Meanwhile, Yoko, on her deathbed, was fading fast. Lacking the fare, the taxi driver left Grandma stranded halfway. Undeterred, she dashed towards the hospital through a mountain trail. In her mind, she heard Yoko's faint cries, "Grandma, hurry, I'm dying!" Luckily, she arrived just in time. Medical staff watched in astonishment as Yoko burst into the room, rushing to Grandma's bedside. A gust of wind roared, windows rattling, and the white curtains were blown to the ground. The wind subsided. All was quiet, save for the ticking of an old clock on the wall. Years flew by. Yoko's father had passed away long ago, and her mother joined him just 3 days prior. Like Grandma, her mother endured years of suffering, lying bedridden and helpless. At her mother's funeral, after the mourners dispersed, Yoko remained alone in the chapel, humming that childhood tune. She looked at her mother's shriveled form, much like her grandmother's, with a triumphant smile, victory over a long-held grudge. So, did Yoko and Grandma really switch bodies that fateful day? If it were you, possessing a young body, would you willingly face death like discarded trash? If not, was this the first time Grandma had attempted such an exchange?